Hey everybody, welcome back. We're here with another episode, and I think in this one we're probably going to wrap up our discussion of Matthew chapter 24. And the reason for that is I think we've given people enough to start thinking about these things a little more biblically, start questioning the standard modern, we're here now and so everything must apply to us mindset. And that's really the main thing. I'm not trying to teach people exactly what's going to happen at the very end, how it's all going to transpire, which view is completely correct. And the reason for this is I think there are solid arguments to be made in various different ways of looking at things on an eschatological basis. I think that there are some really good arguments for postmillennialism, amillennialism, even premillennialism, depending on how far you go with it. I tend to think that the Bible leans more toward, I've heard people say optimistic amillennialism, where we are currently reigning and ruling with Christ, and that will continue, and that we should also be pushing into the institutions of culture, and there should be, governments that are run by, hey, Christian people. It doesn't mean necessarily there's, obviously, actually, the Bible, I don't think would be cool with folks implementing Christianity at the edge of a sword, or to force people through threat of violence to become Christians. Of course not. But we do threaten people at force of violence to obey the law. And so those laws would be governed and pushed by Christians who are following the biblical ethic, right? And so your laws basically become Christian because you're looking at the Bible and you're saying, hey, we want laws on the books that reflect a Christian worldview, Christian morals, Christian ethics. And that discussion needs to be had. And I think we should lean in that direction and then parse out, well, how far do you go with this? Or what do you allow for this? Or, things like that. Instead of just like it's a free-for-all, it's pluralism. Christians are just one of many in society. And boy, I hope we can hold on till Jesus comes. So again, the optimistic amillennial position I think is cool. The postmillennial position, where it actually inevitably will sort of get more and more in that direction, where Christ is going to be reigning and ruling supreme throughout the earth. Doesn't mean 100% of people are Christian, but if you had 20% of the world real Christians, I mean, the world would pretty much look Christian. So again, I just think that those, my opinion is that those are closer to the biblical teaching than to believe that like it's all just going to go bad, and then we're going to get rescued out of here kind of toward the end. Can I be wrong? Certainly. And are there good arguments for saying that's the case? I think there are some, but I think the biblical evidence is better in the direction of either the postmillennialism or the optimistic amillennialism, both of which lead to Christians engaged in law, economics, culture, education, all of these things, instead of retracting and retreating back away from all of society except the church and maybe the family. I don't think that is something that you see taught in the Bible. I think Christians should, like leaven, infiltrate the earth. And then when they do, if you're a politician and you're a real Christian, your Christianity, your worldview is going to come into your politics. If you're in education, you're a teacher, you're a college professor, you're a philosopher, whatever, and you're a real Christian, you're not going to separate those things. But, well, now I'm doing philosophy, I'm not a Christian now. Or I'm an agnostic when I'm doing philosophy. Or I'm doing science and I'm an agnostic. That's ridiculous. Your worldview is going to shape what you do. A Christian worldview doesn't change 2 + 2 being 4. But it might explain things like, why do we even have good reasons to believe that this can be used in the future if everything's just totally random and we're at the we're at the behest of the forces of nature. So I think it's difficult to even really do science if you don't have elements of the Christian worldview. So again, I think it's an interesting conversation that we need to be getting into. I think a lot of people just buy hook, line, and sinker. There's going to be this tragic, crazy nuclear holocaust that happens, and we just got to hold on till we get there. And the church really should just be out there trying to save a few souls here and there, move forward, and not really do a whole lot while in our time here in the earth. And I don't think that's very biblical. So let's get into, and again, I think some of the verses that we have gone through are very powerful in helping people get to that kind of mindset. So let's dive into let's see here. We're going to dive into Matthew chapter 24. I am reading in the ESV, and we are going to pick up in verse 32. So, from the fig tree, learn its lesson. As soon as its branch becomes tender and puts out its leaves, you know that summer is near. So also, when you see all these things, you know that he is near, at the very gates. Truly I say to you, this generation will not pass until all these things take place. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away. But concerning that day and hour, no one knows, not even the angels of heaven, nor the Son, but the Father only. For as were the days of Noah, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. For as in those days before the flood, they were eating, drinking, marrying, giving in marriage, until the day when Noah entered the ark, and they were unaware until the flood came and swept them all away. So will be the coming of the Son of Man. Then two will be in the field, one taken, one left. Two women will be grinding in the mill, one taken, one left. Therefore stay awake, for you do not know on what day your Lord is coming. But know this, if the master of the house had known in what part of the night the thief was coming, he would have stayed awake and would not have let his house be broken into. Therefore you also must be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an hour when you do not expect. Who then is the blessed? Let's read the second line there. Who then is the faithful and wise servant whom his master has set over his household to give them their food at the proper time? Blessed is that servant whom his master will find so doing when he comes. Truly I say to you, he will set him over all his possessions. But if that wicked servant says to himself, my master is delayed, and begins to beat his fellow servants, and eats and drinks with drunkards, the master of that servant will come on a day when he does not expect him, and at an hour he does not know. And he will cut him in pieces and put him with the hypocrites. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. So that is the end of Matthew chapter 24, at least from the biblical perspective, right? We now move into Matthew chapter 25. And so let's take a look at some of these things in here and continue to use the biblical narrative, the biblical understanding of words, phrases, imagery. By now, I think this is something that hopefully, if you've been watching the last 4 or 5 parts of this is something you're starting to lean into and starting to do. We don't look at the newspaper and go, how does this fit with this? We don't look at somebody's creed or handbook or doctrinal formation papers. Some pastor wrote 3 or 4 books, and man, they really sold a lot, so it must be true. Just go back to the Bible, and how does the Bible seem to use this language? What was the audience that's being referred to? What are these things? So I don't have to rehash all that. Go back and watch the other episodes if you're interested and want to start thinking more biblically. So over and over again, we have in this entire chapter, but also again right here, we see where Jesus is talking to a specific audience, right? So we were in verse 32. He talks about the fig tree, right? Learn its lesson. People make a whole bunch of, ado about the fig tree, and I've heard this. I actually haven't like totally studied this out myself, but I heard that like they at the the World Trade Center or one of these large organizations like in New York or whatever, they put like a fig tree out front, and this was some indication of some oh, look at this, or maybe it was even a statue or like a rendering of a fig tree or whatever. Again, and then of course people jump on that and go, oh, this is prophecy unveiled right before our eyes. It's happening right here. We can watch prophecy happening in action. Well, if somebody reads the Bible and then uses a fig tree for something, is that the Bible was predicting this, or is that they're looking at the Bible and using the imagery of the Bible in what they're doing? If I am preaching a message and I want to do some kind of demonstration or something, and I start using images that tie into what the Bible is saying, was the Bible predicting that I was going to teach that message? Or am I teaching that message based on what's in the Bible? See, this is the thing. Like, people who are like, oh my goodness, look at the newspaper. Look at the crazy things happening. Somebody said something, did something. There are evil people out there, and there are people who are just shock jocks. They like to shock people. They like to get the clicks. It's clickbait. And so they'll do things. They look at the Bible and they know, hey, these crazy Christians are going to really get riled up on this. And so they'll do things because of that. This thing that just happened recently with the Olympics, right? I don't think that you can look at like 2 Timothy and be like, look, the Bible talks about it getting worse and worse, and people are going to get worse and all this stuff. And then you go to the Olympics and you see what they've done with the the Last Supper, and then of course they try to back off of it and all this stuff. They're doing a Last Supper scene, and it's disgusting and it's horrible. Well, I mean, they're probably looking at the Bible and intentionally getting people riled up. Or then maybe they don't care at all. They just want to get the news. They want to get the clicks. They want to be in the news. Or it's people that are evil and they look at the Bible. They want to pollute some of the things in there or whatnot. It doesn't mean that like that is what the Bible was talking about when it mentioned this phrase. We have to really examine the Word of God and see if that is what the Bible was talking about. Okay? So when we look at the fig tree, I mean, he literally says the lesson we're supposed to be learning from this. So Jesus uses fig trees in different illustrations. It's not all the same illustration. We're not supposed to get the entire, everything about the fig tree applies to this situation. Oh, well, fig trees, have such and such leaves, or they look like they're shaped like this, or they only grow in certain seasons. They only have fruit in certain seasons. Oh, the only certain soil is adequate. I mean, come on. We have to be careful that we don't overdo the analogy, right? Overdo the analogy. And Jesus literally says, here's the analogy part. Here's what I'm trying to get you to learn from the fig tree. Not everything about a fig tree, this right here. As soon as its branch becomes tender and it puts out its leaves, summer is near. So also, when you see all these things, you know that he is near at the very gates. So what is it that he is trying to get us to understand? You are going to see these things. You are going to know. You remember the fig tree. What should we remember about the fig tree? You should remember that you can tell when summer's getting near. You can tell the signs of the times by some of the things going on. And he's literally telling them, I've told you all these things. When you see them happening, you will know this is what Jesus was talking about. So we talked last time about Cestius, coming in, the army surrounding Jerusalem. This is it. This is what Jesus was talking about. And so when they backed out, the Christians got out of there, right? That's what he's saying. That's what they did. And then he goes on into verse 24. And this is the thing that is just so amazing. It's so amazing. He literally says, truly I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all these things take place. What is it that Jesus has to say to get across that he's saying, you guys are going to see this. This is going to happen soon enough that this generation of people is going to experience it. What words could he use? if he would have just told them that they would be the ones to see it. Well, he did. And people try to explain this away. Well, this generation means this generation that will see these signs. He never in here indicates anything about some far off future generation. You have to read that. You have to insert that into the Bible. You have to insert that in there. Now, could you say, oh, but maybe there's layers. Maybe it's that generation and a future generation. Am I going to say that is impossible? No. Sure. Okay. Yeah. Let's go with that. That is on the table of realm of possibility. But what is Jesus specifically talking about? He's talking about that generation he's looking at, talking to right there. And he literally says, you're going to see it. It's going to happen to you when you see these things, right? We've already gone into the way to get away from this thing is what? Run to the hills outside Jerusalem. There's going to be people on their houses hanging out like they did in that day. There's going to be people out in the field. Don't come back in to get your cloak. Well, who in America is going to run back to their house to get their cloak? I mean, right? People would literally grab pretty much everything besides their cloak because we don't even wear cloaks. So again, he's obviously talking to that generation. Other people will say, no, it means this race of people. Like the Jews will not pass away from the earth until these things happen. Again, the word generation does not mean that. If you go study that out in the Greek and look at the word, it means not a race of people. It means a generation, a span of what we understand as a generation of people. Again, people try so hard to make Matthew 24:34 not mean exactly the plain understanding of the text. I say to you that this generation isn't going to pass away until all these things take place. It's like Jesus went out of his way to make it so plain and obvious that people 2,000 years later, it's not plain and obvious to them. It's so crazy. It's so crazy. But again, we can, whatever, believe what you want to believe. Matthew 24:34 is so plain. It's so clear and so plain. It's almost like it's too plain that it's too bland. We want a little spice. We want a little sauciness. We want something better than just like, what? It's already happened? This is that generation? Oh man, what a bummer. Sorry. Sorry. And then we get into the language here in verse 35, which again, I think it can get, let's look at it. Verse 35, heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away. Again, I've heard this explained a couple of different ways. I think one of them is the totally understandable, totally makes sense, that the biblical language of heaven and earth, a lot of times it is referring to the Jewish system. Refers, the Bible refers to the Jews as being, right, like heaven and earth. It's talking about them, what God's done through them, their generational history and all these things. And I think that's plausible, that he's saying, this system, this old covenant way, it's going to pass away, but my word, right, my words will never pass away. I also think that you can look at this at the same way we did with all the signs and the sun, the moon, the stars, and all this stuff, because the Bible does use those to indicate Israel as well, but it also uses those to indicate other nations. The sun, the moon, the stars, just general ruling authorities and nations and things. So another way I think it's easy to understand this, once again, in the context of Jesus just said, this generation will not pass away till all these things I'm talking about are going to take place. Okay, we know that's pretty clear. What did he say next? Okay, did he totally undo everything he just said? Or could it be something like 2 Peter 3:5-6? It says, for they deliberately overlooked this fact that the heavens existed long ago, and the earth was formed out of water and through water by the word of God. Okay. And that by means of these, the world that then existed was deluged with water and perished. Other versions say, the world was destroyed. And so, but the world perished by water. This is making reference to Noah's flood. Did the world, the earth, the cosmos, the universe, did water destroy the entire earth? The globe was gone? No. What happened? It was destroyed, but what level of what kind of destruction are we talking about? Right? Noah, his wife, his sons, their wives, right? The animals that were on the ark, they were all fine. The fish in the sea and stuff, they were good. They didn't have to get in the ark. More water's coming, and they were like, yeah, okay, cool. More water's good for us. So what do you mean the entire world? It says the world, talks about heaven and earth, and that the world that existed it perished. It was a resetting of the world, a reset, a rebirth of the world. But the old world, the earth, the land, the trees, everything was not utterly and totally, completely destroyed, right? Vaporized and then reset. No, it was the evil elements of the world were destroyed. And then the water settled, and the righteous man and his family come out, and it's a new earth. It's a new world. Whole new world. We're not going to, it just popped in my mind. But again, most people would look at a verse like this and think, if you just pulled that verse and didn't know, anything else, just read this verse and you read it with the mindset of most modern, like Western American Christians, you would think that sometime in the past, oh my goodness, there was another earth that got completely destroyed by water and God had to like destroy it and remake the earth. No, that's not what he's saying. So when the Bible talks about destruction or passing away, we can't think nuclear bombs. We have to think, well, how does the Bible use this terminology? So let's look at another scripture. 2 Corinthians 5:17. This is 2 Corinthians 5:17, very familiar passage. It says, therefore, if anyone is in Christ, he is a new creation. The old has passed away. Behold, the new has come. Now, I don't know about you, but when I came to Christ, I didn't like die. I didn't like vaporize and get reconstituted, like Scotty, beaming somebody up in Star Trek. I mean, even that wasn't a total destruction. All it was doing was rearranging their atoms and putting it from one place to another, teleporting them, right? So even that's not a good analogy, really. But again, this verse says the old has passed away. Paul uses death language like he was crucified with Christ. That's Galatians 2:20. Ephesians 2:1 talks about us being dead in trespasses and sins. Were we really dead? Again, spiritually dead, yes. So when we come to a verse like heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away, what we should not do is go pass away and immediately start thinking about some end of the world, Mad Max, everything's just melted and destroyed. And that's not even at all what Jesus necessarily even said. Then he goes into, right, no one knowing the day and the hour. And again, to be fair, there are those who make the claim that right here, verse 34, there's a cutoff. Verse 34, he says, everything that I've said before this, verses 1 through 33, and really the last couple of days, everything he's been saying, about from Matthew chapter 21 on. It all pertains to the temple. It all happened 70 AD. But then he shifts in verse 35 or 36. And now he is talking about a future time where there's going to be an additional coming of the Lord and things like that. Again, in the realm of possibility, sure. But that he doesn't say that. It's not obvious anywhere where he's shifted the conversation now. Suddenly, this generation, you, all these things, and he's continuing talking, and now he doesn't tell them. He doesn't say anything here. And now he shifts his view of something a couple thousand years in the future. Just continues with the next sentence, but that next sentence, doesn't apply to you. Literally the sentence where he says all this stuff does apply to you. Then he says heaven and earth about, no. Now he's talking about people, 2,000 years in the future with nuclear bombs. Okay. Okay. I have to say that's possible. I have to say that because I guess, I mean, it could fit in here, sure. But why? What would make you think that? Right? Verse 36, concerning the day and hour, no one knows, not even the angels of heaven, nor the Son, but the Father only. So he's, again, reiterating that nobody knows the exact time. Nobody knows the exact day this is going to happen. But he just got done telling them, but you will be able to tell the signs. You'll be able to see, like the fig, you don't know exact day that summer begins. You don't know exact, well, we do now because we have the first day of summer, right? But come on, that's just a day that we pick. You'll see the signs, but you don't know the day and hour, right? Because that's what they want. Remember the first couple of questions, they're like, hey, when are these things going to happen? And he's letting them know there isn't a specific day that I'm going to tell you. There isn't a specific day that is known. The Father knows this. He knows all things. He knows exactly what's going to happen. I think this is, in my opinion, I think this is a great scripture. People, believe in what's called open theism, where God, he's omnipotent, omnipresent, right, omniscient, in the way that everything that can be known is known by God, but he doesn't see into the future because the future is not even happened yet, right? That's kind of what open theism, I mean, I might be butchering how they would like to describe it, but that's basically what open theism is. It's open in the sense that the future is open, it's not already set. God does not look into the future and know for certain something's going to happen. He can certainly make things happen because he's omniscient, all powerful, and all that stuff. So, but anyway, I think this is one where, I mean, that day has not happened. He says a specific day and hour, but the Father does know it. So I would say that means that time in the future, the Father does know when that is. So, just sidetrack there. I thought I'd throw that out there. Just, it came to my mind, so I figured I'd say it. But that's not to say that this is the clincher and this, there's no good arguments on the other side. There's good arguments on a lot of stuff. I don't think open theism is right because I think, again, scriptures like this and others, but I also don't think pure determinism is right either. So I think there's a balanced middle, as with most things with the Bible. Then verse 37, right, as the days of Noah, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. Now he's linking it back up to the days of Noah. What happened in the days of Noah? Well, you had the days of Noah, and everything was not ultimately, fully, completely, totally destroyed, wiped out, burned with fire. Everything's just an ash heap, and he recreates everything. That is not what happened. Everything was destroyed. The Bible does say everything in the days of Noah, it was all destroyed. The earth was destroyed. But was it? I mean, what do you mean by destroyed? What was destroyed? It was reset, is what it was. Okay? And can you say that's a destruction? Absolutely, 100%. You're 100% accurate to say everything was destroyed. God starts it over with this righteous man and his family. But I think a lot of times we moderns, when we think of destroy, destruction, we don't think that. We think annihilated, right? And that is not what the Bible is talking about. It talks about the day of Noah, people, and he literally says, what about the day of Noah? That they were unaware, right? He's as with the fig tree, you guys should be aware because you should be able to read and see the signs that I'm talking about. He is saying it's like the days of Noah. What about the days of Noah? There's going to be 2 by 2 with animals getting on a boat? No, that's not what he's talking about. He's specifically talking about the people did not understand what was going to happen. The coming destruction, right? They were unaware. But who was aware? Noah was very aware. He built a boat, right? And so that's what he's getting at, right? So he talks about 2 men in the field, one taken, another left, 2 women grinding in the mill, one taken, another left. Who's taken? Who's left? Right? Well, those that are taken are those that were destroyed. The people, evil people in the earth, were taken and destroyed. And who was left? Noah and his family. All right? And this is where we got into before when you go to Luke and they start asking about the, where were they taken? He says where the vultures are gathered. I'm trying to pull up the exact verse here. Luke 17:37. Because again, this is not the only place where we see these things. And so let's go look at that, right? We're in Luke. So again, oh no, this is the I wish we'd all been ready. And I want to be taken because that's the rapture, that's the second coming, we're taken to be with the Lord. Okay, but is that what it sounds like here? I mean, Luke says the same thing. I tell you, in that night there will be two in one bed. One will be taken, the other left. There will be two women grinding together. One will be taken, and the other left. And they said to him, where, Lord? I mean, he's saying these people are going to be taken. So, okay, Lord, where are they going to be taken to? And look what he says. Where the corpse is, there the vultures will gather. I mean, I don't know about you, but that doesn't sound like a place I actually want to be taken to, right? But in the context of destruction, in the context of the destruction of Jerusalem, the destruction of the temple, this makes sense, right? And the difference, according to Matthew, right? He starts talking about taken and left, but he's kind of differentiating between what? In the days of Noah, there were those that were completely unaware. It took them completely by surprise. And then he goes on in verse 43, if the master of the house had known what part of the night the thief was coming, again, he's talking about things happening. He's got the thief analogy. He's got the one taken, one left, right? It's going to happen. People are going to be, he's got Noah and the flood, right? And he's taught, what is the common theme here? Stuff's happening and some people were not aware of this happening. And then he goes into all right, it hasn't happened for a little while, right? Generation, about to call it 40 years after he's saying these things is about when this stuff happened. And so people have time to kind of get complacent. If you have been living for God longer than probably a month, maybe you've noticed that there are some people who continue on with God and those that seem to not. If you've been living for God for a number of years, called a decade, and especially if you've been involved with ministry, you see that, yes, people get complacent. People, either because of great, good things happening in their life, all of a sudden it's like, I don't need God. It's crazy. And then sometimes with bad things happening, all of a sudden, where's God? I got to make this happen myself. Everything terrible's, it's all hitting the fan. It's all over. And so now I got to work, 3 jobs and completely ignore my family and not go to church because I just got to make this happen. There's people on all sides of that. Some people get really blessed and that draws them to God. Other people get really blessed. When I say blessed, I mean say financially or whatever. And that actually is that they're undoing. And vice versa on the bad things happening, right? So he's saying, right, the master, right, delays the coming, and that servant who's beating the other servants, he's out drinking, living it up. And then the master comes because what? He wasn't aware. So I guess we have the servant, right? You've got the analogy with Noah, right? And you've got the description of one taken, one left, and he's just over and over talking about some that are aware and ready when this happens and some that are not. And I think people read way too much into some of these analogies and try to put it into the future, thousands of years into the future. And it's just like, ooh, this is going to happen one day when there's going to be this thing. This thing that Jesus did not even describe. And when the people who were standing right there with him asked him about it, this isn't conjecture. This isn't like, oh, I bet she's talking about this. They say, where, Lord? And he says, oh, well, where the corpse is, that's where the vultures are going to gather. Yeah, I don't think that's. This does not sound like we're getting taken away to extreme ultimate paradise in the presence of the Lord forever. No, I don't think so. And again, it makes sense because of the context of the whole narrative. He is specifically talking about the destruction of Jerusalem, of the temple. He's talking about death. He's talking about, it was a lot more than death. Death was probably a welcome friend to some of these people that were in such horrible conditions, during the siege and during that time. So let's go through a couple of scriptures here. Mark 13:30. Truly I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all these things take place. Remember in Matthew 23, right? Matthew 23, he said, truly I say to you, all these things will come upon this generation. So in Matthew 23, he led into Matthew 24 saying this. Then in Matthew 24, he's reiterating it's this generation. And I don't think just because he continued talking after he said in Matthew 24, all these things are going to happen to this generation. And then he continues to elaborate, continues to discuss primarily what's he discussing now, something he hasn't before. The timing and the fact that many people will be caught unaware. That is what he's kind of shifting the conversation to another descriptive element, but he's not cutting off the conversation completely. And now I'm talking about totally different event. Again, he opens up with of that day and hour. Well, what's the that? He's literally spent all this time talking about this one event. And then he says, but of that day and hour, no, now he's talking about that day in the future, 2,000 years. Again, could that possibly be? Sure. But what are the chances? I mean, come on. If you talk like that in conversation, if somebody preached like that, if somebody was making anything like that, doing that in any way, shape, or form, you'd be like, okay, that's ridiculous. Who does that? Nobody. And that's why I'm saying, like, there's no reason to read that into it. So, again, we've read a couple of these, but I'll just reiterate them. Matthew 10:23, when they persecute you in one town, flee to the next. For truly I say to you, you will not have gone through the towns of Israel before the Son of Man comes. Matthew 16:28, truly I say to you, there are some standing here who will not taste death until they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. I think people really want to read into this certain things. I think some people make a lot of money out of it. I think some people, it's something they just believe for a long time, and so it's hard to shift or change what they believe. There's a lot of reasons why people just haven't really given it much thought. And I kind of after this podcast, I'm going to start getting into why some of this stuff is important. I've mentioned throughout a little bit here and there, but this stuff is important because if you develop the mindset of, well, we just kind of sit back and one of these days it's going to get worse and worse. And one of these days, it's just all going to be wrapped up and over and everything's annihilated and Jesus is going to recreate the earth or whatever people think. I think that makes a lot of people complacent, downright lazy sometimes. Ineffective, or at least less effective as they could be in the world and what's going on, because they just assume they're not supposed to get involved. Why would bother? That kind of stuff. It does happen. I don't have to say I think it does. I know it does. I've literally been in conversations with people. This is exactly how they think, and it leads to inaction. It leads to less action than would be if you thought biblically about it. Look at Luke 17:22-25. And he said to the disciples, the days are coming when you will desire to see one of the days of the Son of Man, and you will not see it. And they will say to you, look there, or look here. Do not go out and follow them. So we know this happened leading into the destruction of Jerusalem. People rose up and said, I'm going to be I'm the Messiah, or I'm going to be the Savior. Follow me, prophet so-and-so. We're going out here. We're going to destroy the Romans. This kind of stuff did happen leading up to the fall of Jerusalem. It did, historically. And then verse 24 says, for as the lightning flashes and lights up the sky from one side to the other, so will the Son of Man be in his day. But first he must suffer many things and be rejected by this generation. Again, focusing on that generation is going to reject. That generation are going to see these days, and it's going to prolong a little bit, like he said in Matthew, right? As far as the wicked servant, or people just weren't ready for it to happen. But you be on guard. Remember the fig tree. What about the fig tree? Basically, look and watch and know you can see signs, subtle signs that it is coming. It's getting closer. That's the point he's making. So then I'm going to end it here with Luke 19:43-45. It says, for the days will come upon you when your enemies will set up a barricade around you and surround you and hem you in on every side. What does that sound like? And tear you down to the ground, you and your children within you. and they will not leave one stone upon another in you, because you did not know the time of your visitation. Once again, bringing it on that generation, describing the very things that happened in the destruction of Jerusalem. And so I think it's very safe. It's a very solid biblical position, very defensible. I think it has far fewer holes than when people take these giant leaps of generation doesn't mean that kind of generation, or yeah, he's thinking about something with somebody in the future. So he's confusing the people then because they heard him say this generation, they're thinking this generation. And then the future generation, nobody in the future generation knows who it is. So they're confused because, I mean, who is it? Which one is it? Which of these signs is it? Is it World War I? Oh, it gotta be. World War II? Oh, gotta be. Civil War? Oh, gotta be. I mean, again, we can go back through history for 2,000 years and people guess this stuff. Huge things happened. Not even in America, right? I mean, this is worldwide. Things happened in Europe and people thought this is it. This is the, people thought the forces of the Antichrist were pretty much, it's Napoleon, it's the Turks, again, because people are confused. So Jesus is confusing the future generation, and he's confusing that generation because what he means is some future generation that nobody's going to know what it is. Or he meant this generation, pretty simple, pretty basic. And if he can't say that and mean this generation, I don't know what he could have said that would help people understand. No, he meant that generation. That's what he would have said. And that is what he said. And I think we should just take him at his word. So again, this is hopefully something that has given you at least the ability to start looking at things more biblically and understanding things like biblical terms, biblical language. Oh, okay. So when the Bible uses these phrases or it talks about things passing away, it doesn't have to be, oh, I'm thinking a nuclear bomb. There were no nuclear bombs back then. Okay. So helping us to think more biblically, helping us to be more scriptural in the way we approach things, and helping our eschatology to lean more into the fact that the Christian church should be, like Jesus said, like leaven, working its way through the batch of dough. And that is where we're going to go in the future. From here, we're going to start talking about being that leaven. What should Christians look like in their homes, in the church, in society, in culture? What should that look like? Given that, we're not just sitting around on the couch eating Cheetos, covered in Cheeto dust, waiting for Jesus to come and wrap it all up. Maybe he wants us to actually go out and impact the world. Okay, well, in that case, what does that look like? That's where we're going to go next. That's going to be exciting. I hope this has helped you. If it has, shoot me a note in the comments and let me know what you thought. What was your top 3 best aha moments? And maybe one of your aha moments was, Steve doesn't know what he's talking about. Okay, I mean, just say it. Okay, tell me what it is that I don't know what I'm talking about, and let's discuss it. Because I'm happy to be wrong. Well, I'm not happy to be wrong. I'm happy to discuss when someone thinks I'm wrong. And if I'm wrong, I will, maybe not happily, but I will admit it. I will say, okay, I was wrong about that. So let's leave those comments, and we will bid you adieu until the next podcast.